Welcome, House of Destiny. We're so glad that you've joined us today, and we just want you to know that you are a part of what we're doing here. Our destiny is linked together, and we're all over the world. House of Destiny reaches out to around the world, and so enjoy what God has for you today.
Joining us. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, as always, for your love of Israel. We love you guys. You are awesome. So, Mr. Wark.
You know, to say that we live in historic times is kind of an understatement. I think even today, there's been a number of different things that have been happening in the world's stage, but most importantly, in Israel, and with our president, and with Bibi Netanyahu. And so what we want to do is we want to try to start today by discussing a little bit about the election. Now, this is a really important election for Netanyahu, especially since right now he's under, he's under this cloud of accusation, which I find, Jane, is really interesting because he kind of shares that with our president, where they are constantly being barraged with accusations. Jane, what do you think about that?
This, in biblical terms, is one of the most significant things that are happening in the world today. When we look at the Bible and the way that God has orchestrated the plan for redeeming mankind, and then also redeeming the Jewish nation, it just so happens that we get to live in this period of time, which is just unprecedented.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. The world stage it's lining up for a big event that's going to be happening, and we get to be here on planet Earth. The big event is, of course, Daniel's 70 weeks. We know that Daniel saw so much of what was going to happen through history, and a lot of that has already taken place. And now we're coming to a period of time between the 24th and the 27th verse of Daniel chapter 9. And it is unbelievable what's happening. Even to the fact the Golan was just being pronounced as part of Israel's land. God promised Israel so much land, and they don't even have that land right now. But the fact that Donald Trump has proclaimed that the Golan Heights belongs to Israel God is happy about that. That's what I want to tell you. God is happy. God does not want the land divided, and we're going to still watch and see what happens with the dividing of the land, because what's going to happen after the April 9th election is Donald Trump is going to release the plan for
the
peace treaty, which is what Daniel speaks about in chapter 9, verse 27. So this is an unbelievable time that we get to live in, and I just can't believe that God wanted me here at this time.
Yeah.
You and Greg and all of us, we getting to see what is just the most unbelievable happenings. I mean, according to Christianity and our life.
It really is. It's so significant as well because it's over Purim. We know the story of Purim. We just did a show on that on Israel Update, speaking about the miracle that God did in delivering the Jewish people. And this was thousands of years ago. But as President Trump declared that, the Golan belongs within Israel's sovereignty, Bibi Netanyahu got up and spoke about how that was a Purim miracle, another one that God did. And, we're going to get into that at a later segment about why the Golan is so important, but really just strategically, militarily, in every way, with its resources, it's such an important part of the nation of Israel. And it's just really awesome to see that this, for the first time, an American president has said, this belongs to Israel sovereignly. And coming up to the end of the 70th year anniversary, where President Trump declared, Jerusalem undivided capital of Israel, and then the American embassy moved, so many significant things have taken place over this year. So, of course, it's a very significant election.
So, the last time we were there, it was during the time when they opened the embassy. So this team, went to the embassy, watched the opening. We were there during the 70th anniversary of Israel. I remember walking through the streets with dancing people, Jewish people dancing in the streets. And it was like, there was something, to say that I'm personally in love with Israel. I don't know that it's possible for a Christian to actually go to Israel and not have their life transformed.
Absolutely.
Frankly, I have this opinion, and it's just mine, but I'm thinking if you are a believer today and you have a chance to go to Israel, let me say this to you, it will change your faith forever. But I also am a very passionate supporter of Bibi Netanyahu.
Yes.
Because he's a military man and my expertise is in the area of military, I've watched the resolve of this man. I've seen the kind of way that he's responded to his critics. Jane, is he going to win this election?
I think that he is. I think he's going to win. And I think it's because people feel secure, the Jewish people feel secure. And I think during this period of time, I think Donald Trump will win again, and I think Bibi Netanyahu will win. And I'm not a prophet, but I am a prophet's wife.
You sure were married to one for
I'm a prophet's wife.
For a long time.
And so that is what I think. I think if they don't win, if Bibi doesn't win, and if Donald Trump doesn't win, then I would say the time of the tribulation is closer than ever before. But I do believe that we have at least another term with Donald Trump. And after that, I think things will be a lot different. Chaos will hit the world. There's going to be a lot that happens because, the peace and security phrase that the politicians keep speaking about. They all speak about peace and security. Well, we know when they say peace, peace, then sudden destruction comes.
Yes.
But the only reason that they're going to say peace is because the peace deal that is going to be pronounced by Donald Trump, and whatever they've decided and however they've decided to do this peace treaty, the end result of it is I don't believe it's Donald Trump or Kushner that are actually confirming this. They're going to create the plan that is going to be confirmed by somebody else. The somebody else, the many with the somebody else, happens after the initial peace treaty, is what I believe. And this is just Jane speaking. I believe that after this is going to be the confirming, because there's already a peace covenant, you see, and Daniel 9 speaks about confirming a covenant or enlarging the covenant. It's not creating the covenant. So this is step one, I believe, of this peace treaty. And I think it's very significant. It's got to do with Daniel 9, verse 27. And you can trust what Daniel prophesied, because we know that everything he prophesied before came to pass exactly the way he said it would. To the fact of the empires that came through the image, head of gold, and so on and so on, all the way down to the legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay. We can see that, and then Jesus was cut off. Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. Of course, we know that Jesus, he was crucified, and not for himself, but for the sins of mankind. And that all happened in that period of time. And so this Daniel prophecy is one of the most significant prophecies in the Bible, and everybody should know about it. So I'm really enthused to tell you all about Daniel and Daniel's 70 weeks, because it's my favorite subject.
It really is your favorite subject.
It is.
It really is.
It is.
We were talking about this the other day about whether or not we think Bibi's going to win. Donna and I have had very long conversations on the phone about this. She texts me at all hours of the night, and then we end up talking for ages about this. But after the terror attack happened, where there were rockets fired out of Gaza into Tel Aviv, and thank God the Iron Dome intercepted and God protected his people. But when Netanyahu responded the way he did by going into Gaza, hitting 100 targets, I really think that's boosted. There was talk, obviously, people were complaining that he was being weak in his response to the arson-cut attacks that we looked at that were happening earlier on in the year, where so much of the Israeli economy got hammered because the Palestinians were flying in these arson-cuts and burning up so much of the agriculture, which Israel's dependent on. There were some people saying, his response to this has been weak, it hasn't been strong enough. But after those rockets that came in towards Tel Aviv, the response that he had there, I think, was on point.
Do you know, Greg, that Russia is not very happy about what Trump did today, about recognizing the Golan? Because that Golan Heights has the largest gas reserve that they've ever seen in the history of the world. And no wonder Russia would love to have that gas. I mean, they're not in Syria for no reason. They're there because they want to take the spoil. And that is what Ezekiel 38 is speaking about. They come from the north to take the spoil. Now, 10 years ago, Israel didn't have any spoil. There was no spoil. When I went and told Duby, I said, this land has got so much wealth. He said, where? I said, I want to just tell you, there is wealth in the ground, Doobie, and we're going to see it because the Russians are going to come. They want to take this spoil. And back then, there was no Russians on the border of Israel. I mean, who would have thought? We have Turkey, we have Russia, and we have Iran. All that were in Ezekiel 38. Those are all the nations in Ezekiel 38, with the many that are going to come down from the north at some point to take the spoil. And I believe that the spoil is the natural resources of Israel. And I mean, not only that, I mean, when God said, when the Jews come back to the land, that land is going to flourish. And here Israel exports the best fruit you can ever eat.
Oh, it's amazing.
I mean, flowers, everything is just like the Bible said it would be, just like it would be in the the end times.
Yes.
So we are watching Israel blooming, just like the Bible said it would. We're watching the Jews coming back to their land. Yep. We're watching all of this happening, and people out there don't think that the Bible's true. To me, the Bible proves itself. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows what's going to happen because he sees the whole plan in front of him. It's not predestination. It's God actually sees the end from the beginning, so he knows whether you're going to choose him or whether you're not going to choose him, because he can see the whole thing.
This is our election talk special. Thank you so much for being with us. And there is so much that we've been talking about and that we're going to carry on talking about. But our focus right now is on the fact that the Israeli election is coming up on April 9th. And we are watching this very closely and very carefully. It's a significant time. There is so much going on between the nations of America and Israel, with both Presidents Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And we're very excited about everything that's going on. And we are full of anticipation for what God is doing. And so this is us. I'm joined by Jane and by Greg. And so this is us. It's going to be a little open dialogue, everybody kind of jumping in, but this is something we're very, very grateful to be able to be part of. And thank you for being part of this with us. So, Greg.
These are times, we're facing an election. Bibi Netanyahu is going to be elected pretty soon. I think it's really interesting that as of the day we're filming this, that the caliphate in Syria is no more. So the brutal, the barbaric, godless, demon-possessed people who call themselves ISIS ended up in a little cave, and then they were no more. Now, that's interesting because Netanyahu is he has a great influence on how that war was played out.
Yes.
And what we really need to be recognizing is how God is treating the enemies of Israel. Now, we know Iran wants Israel wiped off the map.
Yes.
And Iran was operating through ISIS in Syria, and that's no longer a possibility. So God is dealing with these people, but also we're looking at this election. And I think it's interesting, the timing of all this, especially in how the Israeli people are going to look at Bibi Netanyahu as they vote in the next couple of weeks, Jane.
Knowing that he's the prime minister when the embassies moved to Jerusalem, and when the Golan has been given to, well, not given, but it's solidified, the fact that it belongs to Israel. These two events, and the fact that the Israeli people know that Netanyahu does what he says, that he's kept the nation secure, I think that the Jewish people will vote for him. I really do.
Yeah.
I think that they know that they've been safe this whole time that he's been prime minister, and I believe that God has his hand on him and that he will be reelected. If for some reason he's not, then I think the end of the world is sooner than we think. That is what I think. Because really and truly, we don't know what the other party would do in the situations that arise, but we do know that Netanyahu has proved his strength as prime minister, and I think that the Jewish people will vote for him. No doubt about it in my mind.
And the thing about Netanyahu too is that he's such he loves the land of Israel. He fully believes in biblical prophecy. He completely believes in the God-given, God-dimensioned land that's been given to Israel, and he's been hardline about that.
Yes.
And something that we were discussing earlier is how, his response to things like the rocket attacks that came out of Gaza into Tel Aviv. I mean, thank God for the Iron Dome, that was intercepted, and nobody was injured. But his response to that was strong, especially in a time that's just before an election. That's often a time when politicians are a little bit nervous to do anything, I guess, too forceful. Yes. But he responded very strongly. He hit...
You know that America has put the THAAD missile system in Israel, and that THAAD missile, it's an upgrade from the Iron Dome.
Yeah.
So that is one of the top missile defense systems in the world, and I think Russia got a bit of a fright when they heard what the THAAD could do.
Yes.
Because I don't think that they believed that United States had that equipment.
Mike Pompeo, our secretary, is in Israel. And it was interesting what happened today. Actually, let me read it to you. It says, Mike Pompeo said, it's possible, and that was quotes, that Trump is on a mission from God to save Israel from Iran. Isn't that interesting?
There it is.
So he's in Israel. He's saying that Trump is on a mission from God to save Israel. And I just think that it's amazing today what's going on. It's almost it's so fast that every single day something new is changing relative to Israel. Christie.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, thinking of you speaking about ISIS, I remember when Kim first started singing that ISIS is in a state of crisis, and I remember thinking, oh, this is scary. That. I love the guy, but I mean, really, ISIS at the time everybody was terrified of ISIS. And he starts shouting and singing, ISIS is in a state of crisis. But he was seeing this now. They've been in a state of crisis since Trump, Netanyahu, whatever it is that God's doing. Now you're speaking about how their territory has been diminished to nothing. And that's the nature of of what God does in defending his people and in looking after Israel and preserving them. We've just come out of a time of Purim, which is the celebration and the remembrance of the miracle that God did. We found the story in the book of Esther, where this crazed, obsessed, hateful human named Haman, who was filled with this satanic hatred against the Jewish people. He was on this mission to destroy them. And if you read the text, the original final solution was actually found there, not in the heart of Hitler, because it's in the heart of Satan that this exists, this deep hatred for the Jews. And so we've seen it, you know, take on the form of different human vessels, whether it was Haman, Hitler, Stalin, at the moment, you know, Hassan Rouhani, the Ayatollah Khomeini, whoever these people are, that it's the same rhetoric of hatred. But in spite of all of that, we see God preserving and protecting and defending his people.
I mean, look, Haman was trying. If Haman had succeeded, he would have wiped the Jews off the face of the earth.
Yes.
And if Hitler had succeeded, he would have wiped the Jews off the face of the earth.
Yes.
And so now Iran is doing the same thing.
Exactly.
They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So all of you out there, you need to be praying for Israel.
Yes.
For the peace of Jerusalem, because that is what God said we must do. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I'm praying for the kingdom to come.
Yes.
I mean, that's what Jesus said. Pray for the kingdom to come, because the kingdom is the new millennium that we're going into. The new millennium is not the here yet. The kingdom, in that aspect of what he was talking about, is not here yet. That kingdom that Jesus said to pray for is the new millennium. That's where we rule and reign. That's why we're on this earth, because we have to overcome what comes against us. This is where we learn how to overcome. This is where we learn, we get character in our life, because otherwise we won't qualify to rule and reign in that next life.
When you talk about praying for Israel, listen to me, there's a demonic strategy that is underway to invade Holy Land. And let me say this also. It's interesting to me that ISIS was trying to erase history. Their goal is to erase history so that people forget. It's kind of like in America today, our kids are not taught history, so they don't know history. You look at some of the people that are running, that are won congressional seats, that don't even know what socialism is. But see, that's the goal of the enemy. See, he has to erase the Holy Land and all of its sites so that men will forget and turn to godlessness. And that's why it's, you know, when you pray for Israel, remember that there is a strategy underway. Right now, the caliphate is dead, but guess what? Satan is like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He's walking the land today, looking for another strategy. Is it Russia? Probably. Is it Iran? Probably. Is it Turkey? Probably. We also have the issue of the Kurds, who are very amazing people. The Kurds are right now could be right in the sights of the enemy to destroy these great people because they're friends with Israel. Please continue to pray for Israel.
Yes. It's so important, and it really is. It's a mandate. You know, when we all know, for those of you that have been supporters for a long time of Kim and Jane, you know how Kim felt about Israel. His love for that land and those people was unparalleled. And it was a mandate on him.
Yes.
He wasn't just somebody who got up and said the odd thing about Israel. He was a prophet ordained by God, put on the earth at a time such as that, and he was a prophet to the nation of Israel. Really reminiscent of the Old Testament prophets, really, if you look at the message that he carried and what God did through his life. And so as supporters and as followers, like Greg was saying, we have a mandate, and that mandate is to pray. You know, what we're fighting here is a spirit.
Yes.
And as the Bible tells us, we do not wage war against flesh and blood. It's against principalities and powers, rulers of this dark world. That is what we're fighting. It's not a person, it's a spirit. And that's something that, you know, we need to be militant about in our prayer life. It's something that we need to be actively participating in. It's not something we can really afford to kind of get lax about.
Because God does nothing unless he reveals it to his servants, the prophets.
Yes.
And the prophets, right throughout the Old Testament, God revealed his plans.
Yes.
And so it proves God reveals his plans to his prophets, and that is what we can see. Because you know why he did that? Was so that you out there can know that God is on the throne, that he knows what's going on, that he sees the end from the beginning, because he's already revealed it to the prophets. They've spoken into existence, and you can see how throughout history the prophecies have come to pass. I mean, the dead bones have come to life. In Ezekiel chapter 37, the dead bones have come to life. Israel became a nation, and here they're in the land, it's flourishing, and here we are seeing the signs of the end coming before our eyes, and we get to see it. It's just amazing.
You know, one of the things that I think we can gauge, it's easy for us to gauge where things are when we see people turning against the Jews.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember when we were in Ukraine, most of you probably know this, but Ukraine, there was a mass murder of hundreds of thousands of Jews. And when we were there was actually a kind of a cove in the ground where they buried 60,000 Jews. And so as soon as the war broke out in Ukraine, they began to persecute the Jews in Ukraine. When you see a political party turn against Jerusalem or Israel, then that's a sign. When you see Israel begin to be attacked by bombs, but some of these Palestinians actually put them on balloons that drop, and kites, and drop them. You're seeing the fulfillment of prophecy.
Yes.
And you know that something is going on in heaven that God wants you to be aware of.
Yes.
And this is something we're going to keep talking about, because this election that's coming up on April 9th is incredibly significant, and there's a lot hanging in the balance here. So the encouragement is pray with us.
Yes.
Let's expect God to do for his will to be accomplished in the nation of Israel as this election is underway, and of course for his will to be continually accomplished in the nation of America. And we know this, that the law that God wove into the fabric of humanity back in Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you. He said it of Israel, and we are seeing that in America. There is a blessing on America, and I believe firmly that it's because of the alignment with Israel and because of the stand that President Trump has made supporting Israel and supporting the Jewish people. So thank you for watching. Please keep watching, and just make sure that you stay up to date with everything that we're doing, and God bless you.
To say that we live in historic times is kind of an understatement.
The world stage it's lining up for a big event that's going to be happening.
So many significant things have taken place over this year, so of course it's a very significant election.